Hello, and welcome to Out in Space, the podcast for LGBT astronomers and allies. I am Vlad. I'm an assistant professor of astronomy at an MSU, and I am bisexual.
I'm Cass. I'm a Winton Fellow in Theoretical Astrophysics and Exoplanets at the University of Leicester, and I'm gay.
I'm Alex Ticci. I'm a graduate student at Columbia University, and I'm gay.
I'm Jody Burtis. I am a graduate student at New Mexico State University, and I'm gay.
Thank you, John. Yeah, this is the first Out in Space they do, so thanks for being the guest.
Sure.
So, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Mulchaey? Mulchaey. So John Mulchaey is director of Carnegie Observatory in Pasadena. He works on galaxy groups in the universe, including the Milky Way. And, we are going to ask you actually to explain more. So just giving a brief introduction. His work done X-ray emission, intergroup median, using space-based and ground-based observations. PhD is from 94, University of Maryland, and he's also been the editor of APJ, or was, from 2005 to 2011. So pretty heavyweight here.
Yeah, I realized that my bio is a little out of date. That was probably all written in 2010 or something. I probably
There's
need
more stuff now.
If that's all true, though. Everything you said is true.
Right. So I was wondering, can you tell us more about what you do?
Sure. You want me to start with the science, probably? So, honestly, these days I don't get to do much science myself because, I direct a major observatory, so that takes up most of my time. I do still supervise some postdocs and graduate students that do most of the work, so I do a little bit. When I was a graduate student back in Maryland in the early 90s, actually my thesis was actually on black holes, AGN and black holes. But I had a little side project, which was to look at groups of galaxies. At that time, we didn't really know if groups of galaxies had a hot medium like we know clusters of galaxies have, like the intercluster medium. And so I wrote this proposal to the ROSAT mission, which was the X-ray mission at the time. And it was very poorly ranked. It got a C. They used to rank their proposals A, B, and C. And if you were A, you got your time. B, you probably got your time. And C, you'd have to get lucky. So in 1993, I got really lucky, and my C-ranked proposal actually got an observation, and we discovered X-ray gas in a group. And this was really the first time anybody had seen that. In retrospect, it seems like, yeah, we should have known that, but at the time we didn't. Science works. And it's a pretty substantial amount of X-ray gas there, which really, for the first time, allowed us you can use the hot gas to estimate the mass of the system using hydrostatic equilibrium. And when you do that, you find that there's a lot of dark matter there, which once again seems not very surprising in 2019, but in 1993 was a big deal. So this was my side project. I wrote a little paper on it in 1993, and it got a lot of press. In fact, the AAS picked it up as their big, at their January meeting in early 94, picked it up as their kind of big science result. And so it was all over the place, made the front page of the New York Times. It was a big deal at the time. And my career kind of got launched and sent me off in a very different direction than what my thesis actually was. So at that same meeting, I happened to be interviewing for jobs, which is very good timing. Science is all about timing sometimes. And from there, I interviewed for the Carnegie Fellowship, which was quite interesting because when I wrote my application, I figured, I was mostly an X-ray astronomer, and it is an optical observatory. And so I thought, they're never going to hire me. And so I spent like 5 minutes writing my application, but I got an interview anyways. And then the interview went so well that they offered me a job, which was really quite shocking to me. And 25 years later, here I am, still at Carnegie. I actually had hoped to go to the University of Hawaii. That was my plan. But the interview with Carnegie went so well that it really changed my mind. And then I ended up here. And then I continued to work on groups as a postdoc at Carnegie, and then I got promoted to being a staff member at Carnegie in 1999, and then associate director, and then interim director when Wendy Friedman stepped down, and then I became director about 4 years ago. So yeah, I've been at Carnegie 25 years. I just had my big 25-year party a couple weeks ago.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Yes, there's a video. You don't want to find. I won't tell you what the video is. My employees made a video, which was very sweet.
Oh, very nice.
touching. Yes. So.
Cool.
You can find that in the link in the show notes at the end.
Yeah, you might be able to find it. I suspect it's on YouTube. I haven't looked. Sure. Somebody will know.
I was going to ask you what your trajectory was and what got you interested and where have you been, but I think you've covered that so well that I think we can just probably go on to the next question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. So moving on to sort of more, of the LGBT side, more of the outside of out in space. Sure. Sort of in your opinion, can you kind of tell us what you think are the main problems that gay astronomers face in the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been out for quite a long time. Most people probably were not born. Since I was out in '92, so it's been a while.
That's when I was born.
Yeah, see, there you go. I'm guessing that a lot of you were born around that time. And because my own postdocs now are that age, right? And so, it was a very different world in 1992. Ellen DeGeneres was still straight at that point. I mean, there was really, it's quite actually interesting. I had the newspaper. I mentioned that I had this big science result, and I was on the front page of a lot of papers. Well, I was a student at that point. I was actually finishing my thesis at Up at Space Telescope in Baltimore. So I have this copy of the newspaper, the Baltimore Sun from that day, which has my story. My face is actually on the front of the Baltimore Sun. And then the article there is "Don't Ask, Don't Tell." And so this was actually, that gives you an idea of what's happening in that article, right when I'm having this big thing. That's the world we were living in. And that was considered a lot of progress. And it really, obviously, was not very good progress. But, that's what the world was like then. So, for me, I've been out so long, and I'm the boss now at my place. So I don't, there's only one person in the institution that's higher ranked than me. So I don't think I have the pressures that a young person has.
I think you're very right, because I think it can take, a lot of bravery, and sometimes people think it's foolhardiness, right, to be out. And a senior member of staff at University of Leicester told me not to out myself at an interview for a fellowship that I went to. And I just, I told him, if they don't want to give it to me because I'm gay, then I don't want it. And I did. I mentioned my wife in the interview, and I still got the fellowship, right? It wasn't a problem. But at the same time, I had at the time the security of, I still had 3 years left on my contract. I still had this, I still had that. So, the line that you're not prepared to cross moves depending on your circumstance, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So that is something I think just hasn't really changed, because, coming out and being open about it is a very difficult process for all of us. It happens at different, I was 25 when I came out, which at the time was actually not that unheard of. So these days, it can be late, but I know individuals older than that hadn't come out. So you have to be comfortable with it. But it does definitely impact your ability there. Sorry, somebody was going to say something.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's just, I think exactly what Cass was saying was right on, that we, at this point, I think we're getting more comfortable with this idea that I don't want to be at a place that is not going to be accepting for me, which is, before I think we would have, many of us in the community might have hidden it a little more and said, and even still, I mean, I've already listed this podcast on my resume as something that I'm working on from the outreach standpoint, but I have left it off of resumes that I've sent to certain places I'm applying to postdocs, just because I kind of know that it might be more of a problem in those places. So, I'm not ashamed of who I am by any means, but I'm still making those kind of choices in order to further my career. And, it's still a choice that we face from time to time.
You're not ashamed of who you are, but you're not naive either, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to be like sort of a balance there about, you definitely don't want to work somewhere that isn't going to be very accepting, but you also need to get paid. You need a job.
Right. Right.
It's interesting. Even, I run my organization. I have one person I report to, which is the president of our larger institution. And he's new. He's only been there about 18 months. And so when I met him, I've never said I'm gay. It's not surprising he found out. And it was interesting. And I don't care that he found out, but it's the sort of thing, do you have that conversation or not? Because just 6 months before he showed up, I had a conversation with the COO of our company, who asked me, if I was married, and I said I was, because I was married at that time, and he was just like, well, what does your wife do? And I'm like, oh, there's that awkward conversation we always have to have, right? That guy happens to be a hardcore Republican Trump supporter. Actually, I know this, And so that was a little weird, even for me after being out 27 years or something, I don't know. It's still awkward, right? The interesting thing is my boss, however, found out probably from somebody that I was gay, and he has tried to work it into the conversation so that I knew that he knew. And so I mentioned I was going to Provincetown about 8 months ago, and he's just like, "Oh, I hope you meet a man there." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Let's not go there. I'm not sure I want to get that into this conversation with my boss. So, I mean, I think the thing is that even at all levels, even though, as I said, I'm at this point, my career is pretty established, and I shouldn't really have to worry about anything. It's still a little awkward to talk about it.
Right.
Mm. John, I wonder if you could speak a little to where you came from before, your background, and then, something that I think about a lot is, as a single gay man, where am I going to land? You can't just go anywhere in the world that's going to suit us. And I think Pasadena or LA is, a better place than most. But, were you ever worried about that geography, not so much their institution?
Yeah.
Where you're going to land?
Absolutely. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, so clearly that's a place where it's fine to be kind of gay. Even though I also grew up in a very Catholic family, so it wasn't very accepted at home. That said, my mom recognized that I was gay very early on and started having these talks with me when I was like 10 and 11. And I had no idea what she was talking about, of course, but it's okay to be different. It's okay. And it turns out that I had an aunt who was a lesbian, and I just didn't know this. And so my mom was very hyper aware of it, and she saw that I was gay, and so she supported me in that way. But I have always been in big cities. I went to University of Maryland, so I was outside of Washington. But even then I was kind of out, kind of not out really. It wasn't until I moved to Baltimore that I came out, and it's an interesting town. I think it's better now than it was, but it was still a town in the 90s where there was hate crime, a lot of hate crime. But then when I came to Pasadena, clearly at that point I was fully out. And obviously this is a town where it's much easier to be gay in Southern California. And I was dating somebody pretty seriously at the time. And so when I applied for faculty jobs, I really restricted myself to Southern California. And I was lucky. I had 3 offers, one of which was Carnegie. But of course doesn't always happen. And so in fact, one of the younger gay men I mentioned who is out is having this struggle now because he's in a place that is not so friendly. And it's a place where he feels he can't long-term stay and have a life. And so that's really, really important. And, what I always tell people is you need to make decisions, what will make you happiest. And that is different for different people. For some people, that maybe your job is the most important thing and you just have to have that. But often it isn't. And I see people often make decisions for their jobs that I would not. I would take a lesser job, and I hate to use that term, but maybe a job that's not quite as exciting to you or as prestigious as, in some sense, for a more balanced home life. You're not going to be happy working all the time.
Yeah.
So, this is advice I give all young people that pass through Carnegie. And it's hard because we all want to, you get a PhD, you put a lot of work to get this far. You really want to do well.
Yeah. Just following up on that, do you think you might have even left Astro if you had no? You said you were very fortunate to land in Southern Cal, but if you would, if you had to take a job, your only option was a place like that. Yeah.
Sure. It's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I was a born astronomer. I like to say I was into astronomy when I was like 5, and I was pretty hardcore. I built a telescope. I grounded the mirror when I was 12. I was really, really hardcore astronomer. And so I think it would be hard for me to imagine not being an astronomer. But my guess is if got to it, I probably would have. And this is another difference. I'd say in 1999, there were very few options. I mean, or at least we didn't hear about options, right? It was you have to be a faculty member at Caltech or Princeton, or you were a failure. That was kind of the world. And I think today we know that that's not the case. And I always tell, many of our best people go after they finish their PhD and a postdoc, decide that they want to go work in industry to be happy. And I think that that's great. There's a lot of opportunities for us. And so I feel that stigma is less than it's certainly less than it was 20 years ago. So today I would tell people, well, yeah, go ahead and work for Google and make $400K a year. You'll be quite happy.
Yeah.
And using your brain in a different way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So You talk a lot about how things are sort of different over, during the timescale of, you're right, the landscape has been completely different now than what it was sort of 20 years ago. So I guess one of the questions that kind of I want to ask from that, would you say that has being a sexual minority kind of impacted your career in any way?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question. I have always kind of kept my personal life and my career very separate. And I feel when I was a graduate student, because I was so in the closet, that all I did was work. I mean, I worked like an insane amount. I worked much harder than all the other graduate students. It probably helped me in a kind of sad. I lost a lot of my 20s, not, dating and meeting people and doing all that. So that, that was kind of what the situation was. But I really kind of always kept them very separate. And over time, they've kind of creeped closer together. And now I'm obviously fine with them kind of being out in the world. I don't know what impact it's actually had. I thought about this when I saw the list of questions, because I was like, has it really mattered in some way or another? I don't know. I think I don't actually know. It's weird. Like, I don't feel it's been a huge negative. Let me start there. But I don't know if it's also been a positive in some ways. I don't actually know. I don't know.
I think it's hard to know, right? Because you can only live your life in one way. Either like, you're out or you're not, and you can't go back and do it again. So you can't see what the difference is. So it's not surprising that a lot of people don't say things to your face. Obviously, if people saying things to your face, then yes, of course, it's easy to understand that it's having an impact. But if nobody ever says anything to your face, how do you know?
Mm-hmm. I'll say it's interesting because I mentioned earlier the COO of Carnegie. He's going to kill me. Who is a Republican. It's really quite interesting. He's a Navy guy who, I completely understand. We get along in a brilliant way. And I think him experiencing me as a colleague has been very valuable. I'm probably one of his favorite people in the institution. And I think that that's good, because I think it's opened his mind, as always, when you're exposed to people, I'm sure he had no gay friends. And I think now he feels he has somebody he likes who happens to be gay. And so that's a very positive thing. I'd say for me, one thing I'm really blessed with, and this is a little weird, is I think I have a very good personality, an outgoing personality, and I'm very, very tolerant of differences, because I feel that there's good in everybody, and I'm willing to work with that to make that happen. And that's actually how I've ended up being director. It has very little to do with my science. I mean, my science got me going, clearly, but I think it's my personal skills that actually are most important today. And that, in some sense, may have to do with me being gay. I don't know if it does, but I think I'm much more outgoing than a lot of people. I don't think it's a surprise when a lot of people guess I'm gay right away. A lot don't, obviously, when people are asking me about if I have a wife. But I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, that was a weird tangent.
That's interesting.
But in my job, what I spend most of my time doing now is talking a lot. My days, I talk to people. I spend a lot of time talking to our young people, mentoring people. I spend a lot of time fundraising. So Pasadena is in California, so it's a pretty liberal town for the most part, but there are many, many Republicans. And a lot of them give me money. And, I have to be willing to sometimes bite my tongue. But in those cases, they all know that I'm gay. It's not a secret. And I hope in some way I'm inching them towards a better understanding of those of us that aren't the majority.
So, you mentioned that, the area that you're living in is pretty liberal, which is great. But I'm curious if you have ever experienced, any type of homophobia from your peers, from your advisors, maybe even from your students.
I don't know of any. I can't think of any cases directly where it, at least in the work environment. It's interesting. The boss, the gentleman who hired me, was once again, he's a pretty hardcore Republican. He was the only one in the building, and it was quite a joke at Pasadena because we would all tease him. And this was in the George Bush days, so we were all kind of pretty depressed about that. And then, but he hired me still, and we get along great. And so somehow I feel like it hasn't impacted me in that sense. It'd be interesting. Like, I don't know. I should think about. I spend a lot of my time giving talks to big crowds. I go to a lot of private clubs, which is a very interesting environment. I had one time where it was very uncomfortable, I'll say, for me to be. I gave a talk to a gentleman's club, and it was literally just men, a men's club, in Pasadena, that the conversations got very inappropriate. There were jokes, a lot of anti-trans jokes, and I found that was very, very awkward for me. So that was a case where I felt, this isn't right, but what do I do? I'm the guest speaker, say something, I bit my tongue, and sometimes I feel like maybe I shouldn't have, but I don't know how. I hadn't given my talk yet, so that would have been pretty weird and awkward. But it was very uncomfortable, and I just will never go back to that club again.
Were you worried that voicing your opinion may have kind of compromised how they felt about you?
How they felt about me and my institution, because I was representing my institution. So I guess that's a case where I would say, and this wasn't that long, this was like 2 years ago. And, for the most part, I often say, I always tell a lot of my women friends that there should never be a men-only club, because they say things when you get them together. It's not true of all. I give talks to lots of men's only and women's only clubs, and usually they're very appropriate. But this was a case where I just felt like they really needed, what they were saying was just really inappropriate and wrong. Similarly, we just have a second thing. We've put up gender neutral restrooms at Carnegie. This is something, so we put the plaques on the door and everything, and that was surprising how controversial that was for a lot of outside visitors. And people have voiced that to me, and I just said, well, you're just obviously not living in 2019. And so that I will say, I'll just say, this is the world we live in, and you better get used to it. But so, I don't know how much those experiences really directly impacted me in my career. Are very small, I'd say, but it shows you that even in a town like Pasadena, that still goes on.
Gender neutral bathrooms are even the law now in California, are they not?
Yeah, no, yeah. That doesn't mean they had
clearly still controversial, but
they had never seen the signs. That's all it was. They had just never seen the sign that said gender neutral bath. I mean, I'm kind of like, really get over it. It's like, so yeah.
Sure, John, how does one get invited to give a talk in a gentleman's club?
Really good question. I give lots of talks around town, and the purpose of those talks is to try to meet rich people to give us money. It's very clear that's the path, and it works. It's pretty effective. That's, you have to meet people. And so what happens is I give one talk. I'm on a talk circuit. I give almost a talk a week now in a private club in Southern California, or even in DC quite frequently. I'm there. And once you give one, if you're a good speaker, you tend to get re-invited. And so I'm just on that circuit, and I give a very good talk, and so people like that, and it's great. And it's astronomy. Who doesn't want to hear about the universe? Usually they hear boring stuff. So why not something interesting?
Right. Yeah. Fundraising.
It's all fundraising. More than half my job is fundraising these days. And that's true of a director or a head of, my job is very similar to a dean in a university, I'd say, because that's what a dean in a university spends most of their time doing.
But going back quickly to the question that Cass asked about, like if being a minority has had any impact. One thing that you mentioned earlier is that we tend to limit ourselves, right, to liberal places, to big cities, where we feel that our community is going to be there and we're going to have a network. So isn't that itself limiting? I mean, there are several, very good institutions and universities in less liberal places, right? In red states, even so. So in a way, we are limiting our pool, right, of places where we would like to do our work because of the location that not only that we would rather be, but a location that would be welcome. I mean, where we would feel welcome. And recently, I myself, I moved from LA now to a city of 100 times less people, right? So 2 orders of magnitude less. That's something that, it's in the back of my mind how the adjustment here will be. So don't you think that that's a way then that we limit ourselves? And plus, it's also said that actually these are the places where we can make more of a difference, right? I mean, let's say that if you want to change things, right, move to a purple state, right? But then on the other hand, it's a balance between our life and the impact that we can do. So can you comment more on this?
That's a really interesting point. I mean, I guess, when I was applying for permanent jobs, I really was in this relationship with somebody who was very involved in Hollywood and movie industry. So I really had no choice if I was going to stay with him, but to remain in LA or the area. But the prior year I had applied more broadly, and I did limit myself to blue states. I've only lived in cities always. I've never lived in the smallest town I lived in was Baltimore, which isn't really that small a town, right? And so it's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it. You're probably right. We are probably limited. It probably is a limiting factor for us. And then the question is, are you willing to take one for the team, so to speak, and live in a place where you're going to be unhappy? For one of the younger gentlemen I mentioned who is out, he's having a problem in a small place now. And it's difficult if there's not a big pool for him to meet people and various things of that sort. And I think that's pretty valuable. So, in his case, I'm going to tell him, if you can get a job at a place where you'll have more of a community, you should do that. So the question is, what do we do for our colleagues that are in these smaller places? Maybe that's the bigger issue. And I don't know. I don't know if we've done anything to reach out to find out what is happening for folks from the community in those smaller universities and small towns. I don't know the answer. There must be there, right? We're everywhere, so that's not the issue.
I mean, yeah, I feel like we are able to provide some kind of community, through either these sort of virtual settings or whatever. Yeah. I mean, they clearly know that the gay astronomers are out there, and I think it's important to kind of be visible. But there's no getting around the demographics of these small towns. And I've actually been saying for a while that the big cities are really kind of a vacuum. It's not just that there's more people, but they're really kind of sucking up people from the community, from these, people escape these small towns and then go to the big cities. So we're really kind of overrepresented in the large cities and sort of underrepresented in these smaller places. And it would be very tough for me. I can say that much.
Yeah. So you got, it's interesting. One reason I agreed to do this podcast, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, if you went back and told me 25 years ago I'd be doing a podcast on this topic, I would have said, there's no way ever. That was the way the world was back in 1993 or 94. And so the fact that one reason I agreed to do this was simply because I do think it's important that people see that you can be a member of this community and be successful in your career. I realized it was interesting. So I just added myself maybe 8 months ago to the astronomer list, which is probably how this all happened, right? Because I hadn't done it. I knew about it. It just never occurred to me that there was any value for me adding my name to that. But there's huge value to adding my name to that. I looked at that list and went, well, they should see people who are actually in leadership positions in the field, right? I mean, being gay has not impacted me in a real negative way. Clearly, I've gotten an amazing job. I have Edwin Hubble's old office, for God's sake. I mean, when you think about that, that's just how impressive is that? I mean, it's, and so I think you need examples like that. Otherwise, people aren't going to be comfortable pursuing these careers. And so that's one reason. That's why I agreed to do this. That's why I added my name to that list. Because I realized that even though it's known that I'm gay, and many people know I'm gay, it's not a secret, I hadn't really used that in a way to give back to the community. So here I am. Mm-hmm. We'll see how it goes. But I think it's important to do it. It just had not occurred to me that I should be doing this, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. If you have the privilege to be visible, then it's definitely a big.
That's right.
It's a big help. I think. I try to be as visible as possible. On Twitter, for example. I think it's important to just show that we're out here to the extent that we are able to.
Mm-hmm. And fly the flag. True.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this last few minutes that we have left,
just so you know, we're not going to get cut off. Looks like I think we're fine to go past the 40 minutes, but I know we're running long. I was just glad. I don't know if you had concluding remarks. I just wondered if you had any sort of, John, kind of thoughts about specific advice for younger astronomers coming up. I think maybe you've touched on these things before, but if there's anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's important to try to find people who to communicate with, and I said, these two young gentlemen have found me now in terms of somebody that they can mentor, and they can ask me questions that they certainly can't ask anybody else. And I do think there are more resources out there. When I was first coming out, the AAS had nothing. There was no gay community at all, and now there are communities. There are things like this. This is just really great. And then you should reach out and try to find colleagues. I mean, I know events go on at the AAS meeting and various other places where you really can meet other people. I mean, I just think the thing is people sometimes need somebody to talk to who's been through your experience, and that's why we should be here for that. So,
yeah, I think it's invaluable.
I think it's also great for young astronomers to see successful LGBT astronomers in the field and know that that is attainable. Young astronomers can in fact go on to be incredibly successful and out, and it's really great to see that and know that that's on the horizon.
Yeah. That's right, and that's again why I agreed to do this, because I think it's important, and so I need to do more. I know, and there are probably more of us. I don't know. I'm trying to. It's interesting, but it is important that people see those examples.
Cool.
If we have more time, I would like to then ask one extra question. I would like to touch the point of stereotypes. So, there is a stereotype, right, of the gay person, and I wonder if that translates into what is seen as a deficit that we see in science. Right. The stereotype out there is that the LGBT person is more like a media and arts person. I myself, I've seen that too. I mean, like when I was living in New York, I had roommates who were gay, and once like the some of the few times that we went out as a group. Like my roommate would introduce me. Hey, yeah, this is Vlad, my roommate, and he's not the typical gay guy. I was like, all right, okay, where did that comment come from, right? And then what they were meaning is that like I was working on in science, whereas they were working in media or arts. Also, when the movie about Alan Turing came out, right, that was something that I heard also. People saying, "Wow, I mean, like we have seen, representations of gay people in the media, in arts, but like as a scientist, I haven't." Yet seen, and these are comments that I heard actually from gay people, right? So, do you think that the stereotype of the gay person as a media arts person has been hurting us in science somehow?
I don't know. I mean, I'm in the town where there's a lot of media, obviously, and the entertainment industry's here, and I do have a lot of gay friends that work in it. And, I don't think that's bad if that's what they want to do. I guess the question is why are we not making a bigger deal of our gay scientists, right? I often wonder this. You see, Out Magazine or something, and their top 50 people under some age or whatever. And, it's very rare that they actually have a scientist listed in that. It will be mostly actors and actresses and things of that sort. And, why not? Why shouldn't it be a scientist? And maybe, once again, that's our own fault for not being as visible as we should be. Or maybe we just need to push that and let people know that we're here and that this is something they can do. For younger kids, I mean, I don't know how you get to young kids, and let them know. I mean, I'm always very careful when we talk to younger audiences to make sure that they see that an astronomer doesn't have to be a white man, an old white man with a beard, and I have a beard. And so often when I get invited to go, people want me to go talk to their kids, and I'm like, I'm happy to do that, but maybe I should take along, one of my young female astronomers and show you something different, so that they understand that an astronomer isn't necessarily an old white guy. And so the question is, how would you let those young folks know, that you can be gay and do this? That's a lot harder, clearly. I don't know. Unless you identify yourself as being gay, maybe. And maybe that's okay, but I don't know. I don't know. It's tougher, right?
I think one of my thoughts about that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Cass, please.
Oh, please. Sorry. Just one of my thoughts about that. I've always wondered is when you work in the arts or in media, so much of your personality and who you are kind of comes out and is expressed in your work. And kind of the whole point in inverted commas of science is that you're objective. We know it's not true. Like we know we have all of these biases, societal and otherwise. But you kind of step back, and I think you're the person conducting the work is kind of removed from the work in a way that, a novelist or a director or whatever is not. I wonder how much that plays into it as well.
I was just going to say, I sort of had a non-traditional path into science because I started as an actor, right? And I remember that, and I started to, I only came to science later. I think there were other barriers for me getting into science. What I always tell people was that I always thought that this was just kind of for geniuses. And I always knew that I wasn't a genius. And so that was sort of the barrier for me getting into science. I also didn't realize I was gay until comparatively late. I think I was 15 or 16, whereas most people report knowing earlier usually. But the arts and theater, I think to a certain extent, maybe we always know that we're a little different, and art is kind of a natural sort of avenue for a lot of us. I mean, I don't know if there's a dearth of gay scientists, that maybe there are, or just that we really find artistic endeavors particularly appealing, and that's why so many LGBT plus people go into it as an expression of sort of capturing us as always knowing that we were different, and that sort of led us to pursue these artistic paths. I don't know.
It's also possible that there's an even number, in the arts and in the sciences, but in the arts, it's a little bit more accepting and people are a bit more vocal about who they are. Whereas in science, you might be a little bit more timid to share who you really are. And so it's possible that there's similar numbers and they're just more recognizable in the arts compared to science.
Yeah, the theater probably has an overabundance of extroverts, for example. Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be the case. Cool. Well, I think we've kind of gone through our questions. Does anyone have any final thoughts? I'm glad you can close it up for us or whatever.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great. And thank you, John. Thank you so much for, being with us and to share your views. I think that we can bring the first episode of Out in Space to an end. That's a great first one.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And, thanks for being with us, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys doing it. I think it's a really good thing. So,
thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're Out in Space. Once again, I'm Alex.
Vlad.
I'm Cass.
And I'm Jody.
So thank you for joining us here in Outer Space. We want to thank our guests. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and share. And we'll be joining you again with more LGBTQ plus astronomers here in the near future.
That was Out in Space. Thank you.